listen, there will be bailouts. Yes, I agree with you. There will be bailouts, but for who? For the banks. Are you the bank? You're not the bank. So, all right, folks, this is not a prediction anymore. Mortgage delinquency spiked by 71% in Ontario. So, it's basically the COVID trap that happened a few years ago. Many thought or believed that, you know, it will never happen. The mortgage rates will not increase for whatever reason, and they will stay at that low ones and twos. However, things change and they will. And as mentioned, this is not a prediction. So let's get into the data. All right, so what is actually happening right now? So Ontario mortgage delinquencies rate hit 0.24% in Ontario in Q1 only, which means a 71% increase. That is crazy. I know some of these numbers, you know, when you hear 0.24 doesn't seem much, but it has risen by 71%, and that is very concerning. Now, this is the highest spike across all Canada happening in Ontario. So that's also something to think about, to worry about. Why? Because Ontario, Toronto, GTA, like British Columbia, Vancouver, those are the hubs. That's what's basically holding on Canada when it comes to real estate, when it comes to these transactions, when it comes to the fire of real estate is basically in these two locations. However, Ontario has seen huge spike. Now, so what happens next? So that's the question. That's $1 million question. But we can we predicted this already, you know, months ago, and we're here. So what happens next? So COVID era, ultra low rates led buyers to overextend, right? So we know, right? Like people were FOMO driven, people were low interest rate driven, people were excited, and they were kind of pushed into the whole idea that this is the last time that they will able to do something like affording a property and build their empire. Let me call it that way. So now the renewals are resetting at 5 to 6%, right? So we talked about that. So what happens is basically that affordability issue, right? That most people are not talking about. And it's not only mortgage, right? Like people say, hey, look, you know what? Like my mortgage will only go, you know, a few $100s. And you might be right. It's not an issue if it's only that. Maybe you could afford that extra few $100s. But what about everything else, right? You got cars, you got groceries, you got inflation, you got the ongoing costs, and you so much stuff built all around that death trap that it makes it almost impossible to stay alive, right? So people are facing payment shocks and renewal time. So this is one of those things that, you know, I've talked about that, right? And the shock is always comes when you least expect it, right? So that's the problem with these renewals, right? And on top of that, we will have the record renewal of 1.2 million mortgages, and that wave already started. And ever since that wave in Canada started, we are seeing these issues: mortgage delinquencies, death rates, debt on student loans, on visas, on their car loans, on everything that they owe, right? Why? Because they simply cannot afford these raises, right? So this is very interesting, and a lot of people have talked about this, have talked about the bailouts. Canada will bail out. They will not let the Canadian real estate go under. Housing in Canada never goes under. It's stable. Hold on a second. Why not? Of course it can go under. Everything can go under. It's a market, demand market, affordability market, like everything else. Stocks, crypto, housing, car market, economics, you name it. It's all the same thing. It's just wrapped in a different word, right? So let's get into this. When the bank breaks, banks get bailed out. Listen to this. But homeowners get blamed, right? So, and now with Ontario's delinquencies rate jumping over 71%, who really gets left behind? So this is the point when people say, listen, there will be bailouts. Yes, I agree with you. There will be bailouts, but for who? For the banks. Are you the bank? You're not the bank. So you owe money to the bank and you will not be bailed out, right? If you're in debt, you have to repay that. On top of that, with the high interest, on top of that, if you're late, there are fees associated with that. So you as an individual will not be bailed out. That's what people don't understand. And when they're talking about bailouts, they're like, oh my gosh, like, you know, bailouts are coming. Yes, for the banks, not for you, period. All right, so it's not just mortgages. So non-mortgage delinquencies up by 24%. Those are obviously car loans, student loans, visa loans. So what is interesting here? Ontario leads in both housing and credit card stress. Ontario leads in that. Why does it lead? Because people lived beyond their means with low interest rates and all of that stuff. But we are the leader. Of course, we have the most population here and all of that stuff. We have to also take that into consideration. However, we're leading, and that's not a good sign, all right? So people are facing payment shocks at renewal time. We spoke about that. Absolutely. People will be shocked. Some of the people are already shocked. And what I have noticed, speaking to some, and they say, hey, look, you know, I have renewed and, you know, I'm up by $600 or I'm up by $800. Some are up by $1,200, right? And they're not taking it lightly. Like, it's like people cannot find that extra, you know, $500 or $1,000 a month, right? Most people just staring at everything around them. They're like, wow, everything is fine. Yes, but at what cost? All right, so let's move on. Inflation, unemployment, debt crisis. Cost of living is higher. Wages haven't kept up. Yes, many Ontarians now kept up with their debt loans. Even spending is slowing by $107 less per month per person, right? So obviously, we all know if you have employment, if you're employed, even if you own your own business in Ontario here in Canada, you know, like things are slowing down rapidly, right? So this is huge. Average $107 per person, right? That's a lot. It might not seem like it, right? But it's a lot, right? For the economy and all of that stuff, right? So real risk, mass layoffs, forced selling. All right, so CREA, which is Canadian Real Estate Association, says the real crash risk begins if layoffs increase. People who lose income may be forced to sell, unable to negotiate. All right, so yes, there's definitely that risk of obviously inflation plus tariffs plus unemployment rising rapidly, right? To whoever I spoke and speak and see and communicate in my sphere, they're fearing for their employment and jobs and all of that stuff. Like, people are not being comfortable, right? Like, every time they would walk in somewhere, they're like, oh my gosh, I read the headlines, you know, 3,000 laid off, 500 laid off, this company closed, that neighborhood restaurant went under, right? It's a tough business, I get it, but if things are going under, right? Like, and that's concerning, right? So Canadian Real Estate Association is saying, look, that could impact. What do you mean it could? it will impact. It already started to impact. Now, people that are selling, right? So everyone has that threshold, right? In their mind, in their head, maybe savings, maybe anticipation, maybe prediction, and they say, look, let me list it, I will write it out, and that writing, it's for 3 months, 90 days, right? So I can handle it. So let me put up the price, let me use that strategy, and on and on and on, right? So they will not succeed because those prices cannot be supported anymore. So as a personal example, you know, when I spoke to a client, they claimed that their condo was valued at $719. I said, fine, right? But however, that pricing is based on you know, the highest peak season ever, all right? So then they said, no, like that's what we want to do. We're okay. We're not forced to sell. I said, okay, can you please give us your estimate what the property is worth? So at the time, I told them around 715 and $615 and $620,000, which was $100,000 less. It's a brand new unit, condominium, beautiful, great location. However, that's the price. And they basically told me that I'm nuts. They still took me as a realtor. I said, look, let me test it out with you guys, but I'll tell you the heartbeat as we go on. So as we went on, we kept receiving offers in that 600 plus range. However, they would not accept it, right? Because it was like, oh my gosh, we're not gonna go down $80,000 or $90,000. This is crazy. I'm like, look, that price is the imaginary price that you thought you're coming from 719 down, but that's not the true value of your place. However, so as we were going on through all these months, and I kept getting these offers that were the market value, they were declining. And I told them, look, the longer you stay, our chances are getting less. On top of that, our strategy will get weaker as we go, right? And you will have to reduce on the price I told you, not on the price you set in your head. And on and on and on. They kept reducing the price, you know, 675, 650, 639, 629, whatever. And I got them an offer at 599. And they said, no, like that's too low. We already reduced, you know, $100,000, whatever it is. Why should we reduce more? So it's that mindset that they said at the beginning, we need this because we bought at X, we want to sell at Y, and we need Z. And that's how it's going to go, because that's what we need. That's the only way an investment would make sense. Don't you agree? I said, I do agree. But if the numbers and if the market, the economy cannot support the demand and the style of your current property, then that's an imaginary number. You know, why not ask 3 million for it, right? Like, why 719, right? So that's the problem. It's the psychology, it's the angle, and people don't like to lose money in any environment. So I hope you got something out of this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.